This game fucking rocks. I fully believe this to be the last good one in the series. This has to be the most unique COD campaign in the series. Following Modern Warfare 3, this game proved that there is still more that can be done with this game formula. Set in 2025, which is now very near future setting, you play through Alex Mason's final years and take control of David Mason, his son, as he tracks down Raul Menendez, a cartel boss looking for war. Treyarch continues to push the envelope even after Infinity Ward begins to waver. On May 1st, 2012, the game was revealed during the NBA playoffs alongside a trailer on YouTube, which showed off the futuristic setting that would shape the series to come. It was also revealed that the characters and conflicts from Black Ops would carry over to Black Ops 2. After this reveal, the pre-orders crushed the Black Ops pre-orders and rose to 3 times as high. They released a series called The Replacer to promote the game. The game would feature many revisions to the COD formula. In the class creator, the player would have 10 character points to spend on whatever attachment, weapon or gadget they'd want, rather than having to go through an unlock branch. It introduced multi-team matches, where 3 to 4 teams would compete against one another. Treyarch wanted the players to play the objective rather than just stack up kills. For the single player part, it was the first time they had released branching storylines, where choices and mission success rates would have an impact on how the story is told. The game's score featured a wide variety of artists, from Skrillex to Nine Inch Nails to Mozart and all the way to Avenged Sevenfold, who got their own post-credit scene followed by a mocap performance of their song Carry On, which was written specifically for this game. On November 13th, 2012, the game was released to a pretty positive reception. People were both impressed and interested in how different of an experience this game ended up being. Even the ones that weren't too happy with the changes were at least happy that Treyarch was doing something to move the franchise forward. One of the game's main critiques were on the Strikeforce AI. Strikeforce missions are these RTS side missions that you can do. We'll get more into depth with that later, but the friendly AI was very frustrating to deal with at times. But in 2014, Manuel Noriega, a man who also appears in the game, would sue Treyarch for the very negative depiction of him in the game. But the family of Jonas Savimbi would also sue the company for portraying him as a barbarian. Anyways, let's jump in and go through the game. Right as you start the campaign, you watch these soldiers pull up to a house. Then you are introduced to our main characters, Section and Harper. When entering the final room, they find Frank Woods. That's right, he didn't die in the first Black Ops. They ask him whether a man named Raul Menendez was present. He is the antagonist of this game, and he is the leader of a terror organization called COD. He was there and gave Woods this amulet and only spoke 2 words, mi hermana, my sister. Section starts getting flashbacks of his own meeting with Menendez as a wee lad. Woods asks Harper to turn on the camera and he begins his story. Alex Mason, the protagonist of the first game, lived peacefully in Alaska after the events of Black Ops 1. He lived there with his son David Mason, who we know as Section. They're out in a tree until Hudson shows up. Hudson explains that they lost contact with Woods' squad in Angola. Alex refuses at first, but after hearing that Woods is in danger, he decides to go anyways, despite David's pleading. This is when the mission actually begins. We're immediately met with something new. Before each mission, you get to customize your own loadout. It's pretty extensive too, multiple attachments, perks and kits. Kits can be used to access secrets throughout the levels. Woods explains the complicated process of narrowing down his location. Then he mentions Jonas Savimbi, who was with the CIA in the Angolan Civil War. Jonas Savimbi was actually a real person that lived. He founded the UNITA with which he gained his country's independence from Portugal. Right after that, in 1974, is when the Civil War started. This mission takes place in '86. You will be fighting the MPLA, who were a rival group of UNITA. As the mission starts, you watch this guy burn alive inside a destroyed vehicle. Mason tries to get him out, but to no avail. Hudson is in the sky, and you move forward with Savimbi. Now this opening section is actually fucking nuts. Instead of having an arena filled with cover, you're just out in the open on a plane with the enemy. However, you do more than just standing out here shooting. You take out some mortars and use Hudson's chopper to blow up some tanks. Eventually you send the MPLA running. After the fight, you regroup with Hudson, where Savimbi gives you Wood's location. He's held prisoner by a Nicaraguan gunrunner on a transport barge on the Cubango River. Hudson and Mason take off for the barge. Woods then explains that both he and Kravchenko survived the first game. Woods was captured and spent years in Vietnamese prison camps. In 1972, he escaped alone. When we return to the mission, Hudson and Mason are coming up on the barge. You jump onto it and begin clearing it. On the barge, you can use your access kit to get a flak jacket. After clearing the barge and destroying all the gunboats, you enter the container. It's full of badly decomposed bodies, and at the very end, you find Woods alive. Right after that, a helicopter assaults you and you gotta fend it off. You destroy it, but it also destroys the barge. You get Woods and step onto the riverbank. You quickly find an outpost with a radio antenna and you decide to use it to call Savimbi for evac. Cubans inhabit the outpost, which puzzles Hudson and Mason. They even have child soldiers. Now you gotta sneak through the base to get to the radio. You find the Nicaraguan at the radio, and it's none other than Raul Menendez. He's talking to Kravchenko, who is in Afghanistan. Mason sneaks up and puts his gun to Menendez's head. Menendez destroys the radio, and when the soldiers enter, Mason holds him hostage. Then he drops a grenade and begins to wrestle Mason. Mason ends up shooting him in the face and jumping out right before the nade goes off. Now you gotta escape. You run through the jungle and occasionally stop to cover Hudson and Woods. Here you can use bear traps, which will temporarily incapacitate an enemy. When you get to the river, a hind shows up. You initially think it's hostile, but then it blows up the pursuing Cubans. Turns out it's Savimbi. When you get on board, Hudson puts on his shades as the theme of the previous game plays, but he is shot by a surviving Cuban, who is then shot by Woods, who insists that you can't kill him. Then the mission ends. Great opener. I love the beginning where you fight out in the open fields. It feels incredibly chaotic, and it's clear that the guys fighting aren't military but armed rebels. That's the part that caught my eye mostly. The rest is super fun too, though. Another thing that caught my eye is the mission length. Before this game, the longest missions were around 20 minutes. This mission took 30 minutes to get through, and all missions in this game takes between 25 to 30 minutes, excluding the Strike Force missions.
Come on, we got him on the run!
That's basically how the business with Menendez starts. At this point, he is just the leader of a drug cartel in Nicaragua. Then Wood speaks of how China and Russia have become good friends, and it ain't solely about politics. It's about rare earth elements, which is responsible for the sudden rapid technological advances. China owns it all, and the whole world runs on it. We also find out that Menendez is also known as Odysseus. The whole US Army now runs on rare earth elements. COD ends up framing the US government for a cyber attack on China. The people now believe Raúl Menendez is their savior and he needs to hit the floor quick. Now we get to the futuristic part. Harper and Section is scouting out a heavily guarded facility under Menendez control. You have this part where you swing along this cliff until you get to Salazar, another guy in your squad. You fly in with a wingsuit and land outside the facility. Now you get a front row viewing of this new tech as you watch an enemy use cloaking camouflage. Shortly after that, the fight begins. It's very fast-paced and feels incredibly smooth this time. When you get close, the level opens up a bit. You can take control of this drone and there's overall a lot of freedom in how you want to attack the objective. The new gadgets provide an incredibly smooth flow to the level. Eventually you make it inside and get to the underground facility. Inside you get a cloaking kit as well. This next section has a very interesting look. It's very clean and pretty bright inside. Almost like a canvas for your destruction as the fighting tears up the level. Moving through this cram level feels really good. You're introduced to more of the enemy's tech like these little ground drones. Eventually you discover this scientist named Eric who's hiding in a container. He explains that he is there to process something called Celerium, which is a new rare earth element that will trump all others. Now you gotta escort him out and he will tell you everything he's figured out about it and give you a sample. Eventually you make it to Eric's workstation. He gives you this little device that is super powerful. Menendez was gonna use it as a cyber weapon that Eric thinks is named Karma. Right in the middle of his explanation, he is shot through the throat and you have another firefight on your hands. You gotta fight your way to the extraction team. As you arrive, you meet Admiral Briggs. He is the leader of the whole operation against Menendez.
You got him dropping infantry right in front of the camp. What do you got there? Who's got me?
Section questions Menendez's hatred towards the West. Salazar, who grew up in Nicaragua, explains that Menendez witnessed the Contras butcher his people. Then his family lost everything to an earthquake, but he and his father built everything up even bigger through drugs. After the CIA killed his father, he started running guns in Afghanistan and the CIA came looking for him in Kabul. That's basically what happens in this mission. When the mission starts, you're waiting for Shao, the US-Chinese contact, so you can go meet up with the Mujahideen. Shao and his boys ride in on horses and now you gotta ride to a Mujahideen leader who will tell you where Menendez is. On the way there, you hear that the Soviets are mounting an assault. Hudson is already with Rahman, the leader. Rahman is less than enthusiastic about you being there. While you're discussing your defense plan, the Russians show up. You ride across the desert until you arrive at these ruins. Here you get a stinger and blow up some vehicles and hinds. After clearing the ruins, you blow up the arches to completely block the way. After this, you go back and fight on a horse in the open as the Russians storm the base. It's a really cool section, to be honest. After that, you enter this valley. The fight through here is actually kinda tough. You're very easily exposed even when you move along the cliffside. After securing an ammo cache, Hudson calls you back to base again. When you arrive, you spot this absolute unit of a tank that you have to take down. You get on it, but before you can throw this mortar shell into it, none other than Kravchenko comes out and knocks you down. You subdue him, blow up the tank, and capture Kravchenko. You begin interrogating him, and this is where the first story branch comes. Mason is still affected by the brainwashing and gets a sudden urge to kill Kravchenko. You can give in and end the mission right there, or you can resist and you find out that there's a mole in the CIA. Woods kills him instead, though. Right after that, you, Woods, Hudson, and Shao get backstabbed by the Mujahideen and left for dead in the desert where the mission ends. The design of this level is very unique. Riding through the open desert in the heat of battle is something you wouldn't expect from this series at this point in the franchise. After that is when you learn about the Strike Force missions. These missions play like a part RTS, part FPS, where you can take control of any ground unit. They vary quite a bit. In one you defend, in another you attack, and in others you escort. These missions are super fun and bring a different challenge to the table. It also offers a break from the gameplay loop. Like the decisions in the main campaign, the success of these missions can greatly impact the flow of the story as well as expand on it. They aren't mandatory, but if you don't play them, they count as a fail. This was a very welcome addition as it brought variety to a game with such a simple gameplay loop. David and Harper are in the middle of sparring. Harper is firing up David, and with each strike he gets a flash from his own encounter with Menendez as a child, when his father was killed. Then David thoroughly knocks down Harper, which impresses him. David expresses concern about the constant flashbacks. In this mission we go back to the 80s again. The CIA is working with the Panamanian president Manuel Noriega to capture Menendez. Here we go to Nicaragua to do that. But before we start, Wood speak of accidentally killing a civilian during this mission. We start as our boys get a visual on Menendez. Noriega gives his men the green light, and then you get taken to Menendez's perspective. He sits down next to his sister Josefina. Then he's interrupted by a knock at the door. He opens it to see one of his men get murdered by Noriega's men. They go in and restrain Menendez as this guy starts insulting and assaulting Josefina. Menendez breaks out and brutally stabs the guy to death. Then he is tranquilized. You wake up in front of Noriega. He unexpectedly kills his own men and frees you. Menendez then beats Noriega to the ground, takes his shotgun, and goes after his sister. You basically go on a rage-induced murder spree where you fucking butcher everyone that gets in between you and Josefina. You're basically invincible in this section. It's great fun. When you get back inside the building, you encounter our main characters. Woods throws a grenade at Menendez that bounces into Josefina's room and kills her. In the following cutscene, Woods explains that he lost his shit upon seeing Menendez again after the horrible stuff he had put him through. Now we go back to where the mission started, but as Mason. When Noriega's boys move in, you begin the assault on the villa. Enemies are everywhere and the fight is tense. This first part does run on the linear follow the objective design we're used to from COD. One thing worth noting is that during gameplay, this game isn't entirely as graphic as Black Ops or WoW. I mean, it still has some of that with the Molotovs and maiming. This game just feels more clean overall. Eventually, you witness Menendez on his killing spree. This puzzles the boys because Noriega has effectively failed his one job. Woods charges at him, you and Hudson follow. As you move up to the main villa building, you get a throwback to World at War. You can pick up these mortar shells, prime them, and throw them at the enemy. It's very effective. I actually looked up how realistic this was, and although it was uncommon, soldiers actually did throw mortar shells by hand. But I couldn't find any sources that spoke of this outside the context of World War II. Moving along, upon entering the court you can snipe a bit. Here we see more freedom actually. You can join the others in a full-on assault, or you can snipe from the tower. You fight from the basement and through the building until you reach Menendez. Woods tries to shoot but is stopped by Mason. That's when he throws the grenade that would end up killing Josefina. When you wake up, you see the Panamanians carry a body bag out and Hudson says it's Menendez in there. Obviously it wasn't, since he's still alive in 2025. At the end, Section asks why Menendez didn't just kill Woods. Woods simply says he's done talking. You're introduced to Cordes DA's second-in-command, DeFalco. Luckily, you have a man on the inside named Farid. DeFalco is currently in Pakistan. American drones in the area keeps going quiet, and they suspect that this Karma weapon is behind it. The boys begin to banter a bit until Harper says this.
Come on, go suffer with me.
This triggers another flash in Section, and he is caught completely off guard. This is actually where he realizes that that traumatic memory that he keeps having flashes of is actually the time Menendez kidnapped him and killed his father, or he begins to suspect that Menendez killed Mason. Woods had him believe that it was some drifter. This memory was triggered because Menendez said something similar to what Harper said.
You suffer with me.
He wants David to suffer for the sins of his father. The mission starts as Section is trying to get this claw to work. Harper kicks it into gear and you begin the fight. Now you go through this flooded building while directing the grenade launcher on the claw. I really like the way this game sounds. Everything really packs a sonic punch. It's great. After that, you go through the streets. Eventually, you push into this alley to not get crushed by this bus. In here, the battle dies down. In this alley, all you find is exhausted civilians that were left to fend for themselves. At the end, you encounter an enemy drone. Now you have this whole stealth section where you have to stay out of the drone's light as you move through the city. Eventually you get into the sewers where the danger is over for now. You hear of a delivery of some suck teas as Section calls Briggs. The boys are in position and ready to infiltrate the Anthem compound to observe Menendez. You sneak up to this roof where you find him. Now you gotta trail him through the compound to listen in on what he's telling his boys. For the most part, he's just talking shit on the Americans until he meets DeFalco. DeFalco sends him to northern Pakistan. After DeFalco leaves, you begin to move out. It's time to move out. You have to dodge drones again. You gotta go to the train yard where you listen to Menendez again. After this, you look around the room and see that it looks pretty familiar. Harper then explains that the CIA used to have interrogation rooms like this. It's in a room like this that Alex Mason was interrogated in the first game. When we find Menendez again, he reveals that he knows that you're there because he engineered the tech behind it. He throws a grenade that sets the whole thing on fire. Eventually you get pinned down in this place where you get to play with the claw a bit. You have to clear the area. After that, you get into this car and begin your escape. This part is a lot of fun. You can choose between an aerial drone or the vehicle. Then you just have fun blowing shit up. When you get to the extraction point, you run into none other than Shao and his Chinese soldiers. They lower their guns when Section mentions that they're after Menendez. The boys are still investigating Karma. Upon reviewing the footage we captured in the previous mission, they figure out that Karma is located at Colossus, which is a floating city in the Caribbean. They fly in and it's an incredible set piece. You notice that the whole area is heavily guarded. The current theory is that this city is gonna get targeted by COD's DA. In the security scanner, the guys next to you are held back, and for a short while you think you triggered the alarm. You get through and begin making your way to the CRC. You enter an elevator overlooking the resort. Harper gets off before Salazar and you. He bumps into this woman who will be important in just a minute. When you arrive at the intended floor, guards immediately tell you to get lost. You take them out and leave to deploy Ziggy. It's this little spider robot. During this part you play as Ziggy as it climbs through the vents in search of karma. You have this zapper that you can use to fry electronics. Eventually you spot these guys planting explosives. The stakes become clear. At the end of this section you take down this guard with the zapper so you can scan his eye for the doors. After this, Ziggy is tragically lost. Now it's time to fight your way through the server room. In here you have this part where you get to swipe around on this hologram thingy. In here you find Karma. It's not a weapon, it's a woman named Chloe Lynch. She's the one that Harper bumped into around 10 minutes ago. You track her to a place called Club Solar. You fight your way out. This level is pretty interesting in design. You basically have multiple paths through the level, the middle and the two flanks. It's not as open as we've seen earlier in this game, but I like that they try to keep it that way. You make it to the elevator. In here you get to see Harper make contact with Chloe, who seems very clueless about this whole thing, but the name Raul Menendez does seem to ring a bell. Soon after, you and Salazar arrive at the club. Right as you get to Chloe, DeFalco shows up. He takes this woman hostage and asks for Chloe. He executes the hostage and then tries again. This time Chloe gives herself up. Then the firefight starts, and this next section is the most 2012 shit in any game ever. After this, some mercenaries show up, and when DeFalco is spotted among them, the explosives go off. When you move on, a dark gloom descends onto the level. Many people were hurt and killed during the blast. You fight through the resort and it gets torn to shreds. Many dead civilians litter the area. You almost get DeFalco, but he escapes last minute. Now we gotta find out why Chloe is so important. I really want to bring up the overall level structure in this game. It has this arcade arena feel to it, kinda like a Doom game. You move around a pretty big area rather than following a small linear path to the next objective. Right before this mission, you actually have a Strike Force mission where you rescue Chloe Lynch. This is gonna change cutscenes and dialogue. Section is back talking to Woods. Woods explains that the reason he and David is still alive is so they can suffer. Eventually, Section straight up asks him what the hell happened in Panama when his father died. Woods was sure Menendez was dead in Nicaragua, but in '89 he shows up in Panama with Noriega. The CIA was very upset about it, so Mason and Woods go in. Here you play as Woods. To start off, you're visiting one of the other guys and he is getting chewed out by his wife. Eventually all three meet out back to discuss the plans. It's a smear operation against Noriega. They're gonna ruin his public image to prevent further uprisings in his name. Woods explains that the plan was good, but something about Hudson and the higher-ups just felt wrong to him. As you sail in, Mason tries to get in touch with Hudson about some changes in the plan, but he doesn't respond. You move up the beach and get some stealth kills. One of them gets a flare-off, so the fighting starts. You get into this hangar and make your way to the roof. Up here you take on some more enemies and get in through the skylight. In here you get the jump on these guys. This section is incredibly smooth. It really captures that action flick feel, the way the enemies run into the level just to get mowed down. You move further until you get to the motel. The approach is eerily quiet. It kinda reminds me of No Country for Old Men. You get to Noriega's room and breach. Noriega is confused and then asks for your boss, to which Woods does what every retail worker dreams of when they're presented with such a request. When they call it in, Hudson tells them to wait for new orders. Hudson tells you that Noriega has valuable intel and is to be escorted to a prisoner exchange. This is when Woods brings up that Kravchenko told them in Afghanistan that there's a mole in the CIA. They're getting suspicious. Even all these years later, in 2025, Woods is still beating himself up for not doing something about Hudson's sketchiness. You move through the slums with Noriega. Hudson makes Mason give Noriega a pistol, but he finds a loophole by not giving him ammo since that wasn't mentioned. The slums are dark and brutal. On the other side, you get to this park. You arrive at the hospital building and enter. In here, Mason once again fails to get in contact with Hudson. The building is dark and quiet and feels very isolated, like how Mason and Woods are kind of alone right now because the CIA is seemingly under Menendez's thumb. While helping this nurse, this brute jumps out at you, but Mason takes care of it. This is when Noriega takes his chance and runs. You get swarmed by the bat-wielding enemies. You walk in here to find Noriega killing a GI and wrestling another. When you get your hands on him, you smack him around a bit until a gunship opens up on the building. You barely make it out, but you find the checkpoint in the end. Here Mason asks about the constant changing of plans, and Hudson simply asks him to trust him. In 2025, Woods is ranting about military hierarchy, saying that he simply got shit done and never questioned motives. Back in Panama, you are in an elevator with Noriega. You're going to a rooftop to kill Nexus' target, who supposedly is Raul Menendez. Two soldiers on the docks bring out a man with a bag over his head. This is Nexus' target. Here you can do two things which will change the story. You can shoot him in the head or the torso. After shooting, you walk with Noriega out to confirm the kill. Woods gets increasingly worried about Noriega's nonchalant attitude. That's when you discover that it wasn't Menendez, it was Mason. If you shot him in the head, he dies, but if you shoot him in the chest or stomach, he survives and shows up at the end. This is when Menendez actually shows up. He kneecaps Woods and knocks him out. David is having a tough time processing that Woods was actually the one to shoot his father. Back in '89, we now see the scene that David constantly has flashes of. Hudson is tied to a chair and David is passed out next to his dead or wounded father. Menendez says that he's gonna kill one of them and let the others go. Hudson says he'll take the bullet. That's when he gets kneecapped. There's a lot of kneecapping in this game. Then he slits his throat. That's when Menendez explains why he did what he did, to inflict the suffering of loss upon those that have done so to him. Then we get back to David forgiving Woods since he was tricked into shooting Mason. Then the mission ends. In this mission you play as Farid, the CIA informant in Cordy's DA. If you rescue Chloe, she breaks into Menendez's network. They find out that the cyber attack will happen on June 19th, but Chloe is suspicious about how easy it was to acquire this information. They tell Briggs about it. He wants to get in contact with Farid and move in on Yemen right away, but Section tries to explain that it's a trap, but Briggs won't listen. The mission starts as Farid meets with Menendez right here. Menendez knows that there is a mole amongst them and that the Americans are on their way. Then you have a really cool sequence where you walk through COD's DA fighters until you get to this stage in front of a court full of people. The Americans show up and now you gotta fight your way to the Citadel. What I think is really cool about this is that you get to see the American tactics from the other end. They swarm the enemy with drones and then drop in amidst the chaos. This whole part has very standard COD level design. You move through the linear streets that occasionally open up into an arena. You reach Menendez and watch as he shoots down Harper's ship. The men capture Harper and here you get another choice. Menendez asks who the traitor is, but it seems he already has an idea. He asks Farid to kill Harper. You can either do as asked or take a shot at Menendez. This choice probably has the biggest effect on how the ending will play out. If you kill Harper, Farid will take his place amongst the main characters, but if you try to take out Menendez, Farid dies. The latter one is the one I went with in this playthrough. After that, you take control of Section again. He's on his way to rescue Harper. You find him and he tells you to go after Menendez at the Citadel. You fight your way out of the town and you get to direct the fire of the drone fleet, which is pretty cool. After a tough fight through the Yemenese desert, you capture Menendez inside this plane thing. He lets you take him without any real resistance, and then he thanks you as the mission ends.
The auto turrets are taking a big threat!
The US has moved to DEFCON 3 and the drone fleet is ready and on standby. That's when Section brings Menendez to the USS Obama. Salazar is interrogating him, but he only wants to speak to David. You get in and sit opposite him. He begins speaking of Josefina, stating that they placed $11,000 as the value on her life even though she was his reason to live. He asks if he is David's reason to live. As his rant concludes, the cyber attack we've been fearing commences. The Obama is under attack. Menendez gets Salazar as a hostage surprisingly quickly and Section lowers his weapon. He is made to cuff himself and is then knocked out by Menendez. This mission will look drastically different depending on the choices you've made. Here I'll only really talk about the ones I got in this playthrough. Salazar wakes you up. The whole ship is in chaos. Salazar says that Menendez must have had men inside. The entire ship, including all its security systems, are controlled by COD's DA. You have a tough fight ahead of you. You separate from Salazar as he goes down and secures the server room. You get some things to play with in the following fight. You can manually control the security turrets. The AI only reacts if after you begin shooting with it, and after you stop controlling it, they will continue to shoot at it even though it's friendly to them again. Shortly after, you arrive at the bridge. The whole server is completely locked down, so you'll have to rely on Briggs getting access from the server room. You fight some more until you get to the CCTV room because Briggs has gone silent and you need to see what's going on in the server room. When you get access to the security feed, Briggs is about to shut down the ship's system, but Menendez is right outside. Section can't warn Briggs. As he shuts down the system, you enter Menendez POV. He is standing with DeFalco. However, DeFalco could be dead here if I had chosen differently. You walk in and take Briggs hostage. That's when we get a shocking revelation. Salazar was Menendez's man inside. He shoots the other soldiers. DeFalco then slits Chloe's throat. However, if he's dead, Salazar will simply shoot her too. If Farid is still alive, however, he will save Chloe and die in her stead. Immediately after that, you get the choice between wounding or killing Briggs. Then Menendez uploads a virus that infects all of the US Army. You're back as Section. He enters the bridge to find that Menendez is now in control of the entire drone fleet as well as every US satellite. Then you go to the hangar where Salazar has surrendered. If Harper is still alive, he will execute him right there. Now you fight across the deck to get to a ship and evacuate.
Section, this is Anderson responding.
This opening cutscene also changes depending on your choices. If you've done all the Strike Force missions, the Chinese will pledge support to the US. If you haven't, they won't. Section is currently escorting the president. They find out that an attack is headed straight for Los Angeles, which is where you are. Your bird gets shot down. Now you gotta evacuate the president. While driving, you find out that LA is basically under siege. The car crashes and you gotta go the rest of the way. When you get out of the wreck, you're bombarded with drone strike after drone strike. You use these stingers to take them out. The truck falls through the highway, but luckily air support arrives just in time. You get to this broken road where you can choose to rappel down or provide sniper support. However, it's eventually time to fight up the road. After that, you take the wheel to continue the escort. You gotta dodge collapsing roads and run over these enemies. As you rejoin the others, morale starts to dwindle because the entire city is engulfed in war. You get rammed by a truck. While out, Section has blurry visions of that night in Panama. When you wake up, you see the jet get shut down. You get out and fight some more. This time you also take on some brawlers. After this, building collapses and you get knocked out again, you get to the mission shtick. You now have to fly this plane. You escort the convoy from the air. It's pretty cool, but not all that different from things we've done already. Eventually you get to full speed and begin chasing down these drones. I wasn't too impressed with this part. I mean, it looked cool, having a dogfight over LA, but the jet controls really poorly. The amount of times I failed from going out of bounds is embarrassing. Eventually you eject and the mission ends shortly after that. Menendez has completely taken control of the US Army infrastructure, and the drones are moving in on major cities. They have been able to trace the source to Haiti, where Section and his boys are about to land. You use this jetpack thing to control your descent after being blown out of the plane. You fall through debris and shrapnel as Haiti comes into view. It's a really cool sight. You land in the middle of the action. The majority of this mission consists of that open arena kind of level design. The level is big and you have a multitude of different ways to fight. You get control of this kinetic strike thing, which almost acts like a guard button, ferociously striking down on your target. Eventually you get into the complex, butchering anyone in your wake. Then you get to this control room where you tap into a live broadcast from Menendez. We already know that the core of his hatred is the absurd materialism bred by capitalism, which he blames for the $11,000 that was put on his sister. In the meantime, our boys are having trouble regaining control of the drone fleet. Right as they think he's gonna strike New York, Menendez self-destructs all the drones. This cripples the whole army, leveling the fight between Cordy's DA and you. Menendez has stolen a uniform to escape undetected. You fight through the collapsing structure and eventually you get Menendez. Now you get to choose whether you arrest him or kill him. I chose to arrest him and now you get the ending to the game. The game has multiple endings and I got the bad one. You see here Menendez breaks out of prison and kills Woods. After seeing your ending, the credits roll and you get to watch Avenged Sevenfold play Carry On. This game is definitely the most unique COD game I've played. The open level design complements all the futuristic gadgets very well. The game is fast and smooth. There's a variety of different things to play with. The levels from the 80s maintain that signature Treyarch darkness in the atmosphere, but the levels set in 2025 has a much cleaner feel to it. The characters' moves feel more surgical and everything is just run smoother. The Strike Force missions brought an interesting spin on the well-known COD formula, mixing it with RTS. My only issues is that you don't have to play it tactically. You can play those levels like any other and get through just fine. It's a fine addition nonetheless. Another notable innovation is the Transit Zombies mode. In Transit, you ride a bus through a big map as you fend off zombies at various stops. Even while the bus is moving, the zombies will try and get you, so you are never safe. The coolest innovation, in my opinion, is the branching storylines. You can play through this game multiple times and get a slightly different experience. The base story beats are always the same, but the ending, character deaths and dialogue can all change. The story takes place in the 80s and 2025. Alex Mason, the protagonist of the first game, goes back into the army upon hearing that Woods is in danger. He goes to Angola with Hudson, where they encounter a Nicaraguan drug lord named Raul Menendez. Mason gets a shot at his face. Turns out that Menendez was responsible for the whole operation that landed Woods in his custody. The CIA wants him since he's basically a super dangerous cartel boss at this point. They track him to Afghanistan, where Woods and Mason fight alongside the Mujahideen against the Soviets. Turns out Kravchenko is also still alive and says that Menendez has people in the CIA. Next, they infiltrate Menendez's compound in Nicaragua with the Panamanian president Manuel Noriega, where Woods throws a grenade that kills Raul's sister Josefina. Turns out Noriega is sympathetic to Menendez. The CIA thinks they killed him, but then he shows up in Panama a year later with Noriega. The CIA goes in after him, but Hudson is acting quite suspicious. In the end, Woods is tricked into killing or mortally wounding Mason. Menendez has captured Hudson, Woods, and David Mason, Alex's son. Menendez wants Woods and David to suffer like he has. Now we fast forward to 2025. Menendez is back and running an armed anti-capitalist organization named COD. David is grown up and goes by callsign Section. They get a hint about a cyber weapon named Karma. Turns out it's a woman that they call Karma. Menendez and his buddy DeFalco go and capture her. COD grows stronger and stronger until Menendez is captured. This turns out to be a trick, as he breaks free with the help of Salazar and hijacks the whole American drone fleet. They think he's gonna attack major cities, but he wants to destroy the fleet itself. You track him to Haiti, where he is killed or captured by the Americans. I like this story. It's not as convoluted as the first Black Ops, but it stands well. Raul Menendez is honestly my favorite villain in this whole franchise. You just never know what he is plotting in that twisted head of his. Anyways, had a great time revisiting this game, and that's all I have for you today. Goodbye.